to this special webinar entitled Power of Engagement. My name is Sophie Tide, and I am a senior studying rehabilitation sciences on the pre-medical track. I'm also a member of the Blue and Gold Society, which is an undergraduate student organization sponsored by the Pitt Alumni Association, whose members serve as student ambassadors for university programs and events. With that said, I'm so pleased to be a part of this event and to have you join us virtually today. The Distinguished Alumni Fellows Award, or the DAF, is the highest honor awarded to alumni by the University of Pittsburgh. Today, we are lucky enough to have 2020 DAF recipient David Frederick and Interim Dean Audrey Morrell here to talk with us about the power of engagement. David Frederick is a partner at Kellogg Hansen, Todd Feigl, and Frederick, a preeminent trial and appellate litigation firm in Washington, D.C. Frederick represents clients across a broad spectrum, principally in appellate courts. He has argued more than 100 appeals in every U.S. Court of Appeals and in 5 state Supreme Courts. Dr. Audrey Morrell is currently acting dean for the University of Pittsburgh Honors College, professor of business administration, and senior research fellow for the David Berg Center for Ethics and Leadership at the University of Pittsburgh. She received her bachelor's in science from Howard University, magna cum laude, and earned a Master in Science and PhD from the University of Delaware. She is the author of several books and has received numerous recognitions, including the Mayor's Citizen Service Award, which proclaimed August 12th Dr. Audrey Morrell Day within the city of Pittsburgh. I am pleased to now turn the program over to our 2 guests.
Welcome, welcome. It's good to see you, David. Congratulations on such a well-deserved and amazing recognition by the university.
Thank you, but I haven't had a day named after me, Audrey. You've got me by that one by a long measure.
Well, you know, I'm trying to catch up with all the rest of your accolades too, so we'll keep raising the bar for each other. How about that?
That sounds good. If anybody ever names a day after me, you'll be one of the first to find out about it.
Thank you. You know, we're going to be having a conversation today about the power of engagement, which is really just the best topic because it really describes your whole personal and professional career. And so tell me one of your favorite stories about how you became engaged as a student at Pitt, and particularly within Pitt Honors.
Well, I was one of the originators, I guess, a founding editor of the Pittsburgh Undergraduate Review, which was a journal that a few students got together thinking that there was a need for this. And that was a very important way of engaging. And I came to Pitt on the debate team, and I participated in the William Pitt Debating Union as a freshman and sophomore. I think a lot of my engagement, though, came as a result of studying political science and having wonderful teachers and mentors in the political science faculty who were very engaged. As I was, finishing up my freshman year, we were in the 1980 presidential election, and that led to a lot of student engagement on matters of national interest.
So it was easy to get drawn into because of the connection you had with faculty. And that undergraduate review, you'll be happy to know that we're restarting that this year as an outlet for student research. And so the legacy of what you started continues within Pitt Honors.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so one of our earliest articles was by a fellow by the name of George Stephanopoulos. You can look it up in one of the very first issues of the Pittsburgh Undergraduate.
I'm going to go digging for that, right?
Yeah. And so, there's fame out there for people that are interested in writing scholarly work and going on to do great things.
Oh, that's amazing. I was reading, one of the things you often comment on is all the things that you learned from your clerkship with Supreme Court Justice Byron Wright. And one of his sayings that you've repeated several times is that if you don't like the system, get in there and do something about it, which I think is not only a powerful statement, but a personal charge. So how about sharing a story about the power of engagement that you learned from Justice White?
Well, so that statement came in the context of the 1992 presidential campaign. And as I was finishing up my clerkship year, we were all young lawyers, and we were complaining about the choices that we had for president that year. And Byron White could be kind of gruff, but he could also be very warm, and he warmed up as we got to know him more. But I remember he had no patience for, these smart aleck young law clerks complaining about national leadership. And that was when he said, if you don't like it, get in there and do something about it. And other than when I've been in government service and not was not appropriate or legal for me to be actively engaged in campaigns, I've been pretty much engaged in political campaigns every other cycle, just because I take those words that he gave us to heart.
And you followed through in your support of the Honors College and the university in the number of activities that you've done and your recognitions, and how did that help you to come up with what you've done in creating the Frederick and the Keefe Awards within Pitt Honors? Because you had a really purposeful intent for the kind of experience you thought that would be important for Pitt students in shaping those. Tell us something about that.
Well, a lot of that is just saying thank you. Which I think is a really important thing for all of us to do when other people do things for us. And I had a great opportunity as a junior at Pitt to do a congressional internship with Doug Walgren, who was a member of Congress from Mount Lebanon. And by virtue of a special endowment, Professor William Keefe, who was a very prominent political scientist back then, he arranged for me to get this paid internship. And I couldn't otherwise have afforded to go and live in Washington for the summer of 1982 without this internship. And it was a wonderful experience for me. I got a real chance to just hang around and see what happens in the legislative branch. And I wanted other students, if they were interested, to have that opportunity. And naming it after William Keefe was just a small way of memorializing his incredible work as a political scientist, his contribution to generations of students at Pitt. And it was a small way to say thank you. And I was happy to say that when I fixed upon that, he is still alive. He's about 95 now. We rekindled our connection.
Oh, nice.
And so we write emails back and forth about this trend or that trend or what's happening in the world of politics. And he's still as sharp as ever and funny as all get out. And it's been a very engaging and rewarding friendship and relationship to me over these 40 plus years now.
So those early experiences really did set you on a path to be able to continue that in whatever personal and professional sectors and opportunities you have. And then now to pay it back for current Pitt students is just an amazing completion of that circle.
Well, I would say that the ways that I've tried to help have been less, there have been some creative things, but a lot of it is just, I got an opportunity that was a pretty cool opportunity when I was a young person, and this is a way of paying back or paying forward, depending on how you look at it. So I think that if we all try to do those kinds of things in the ways that we're able to do, financially, with service, with time, with energy, the world would be a lot better place.
I agree with you. So I have to tell you, I'm such a David Frederick fan that I did a really geeky thing preparing for this day. I went back and watched your commencement address from 2018 when you were the graduate commencement speaker, which was an amazing address. And so one of the things you said in there, I'm going to remind you of, that you said most people in this room would say that they want to make a positive impact on the world around them, but choosing to prioritize that aspiration requires that you set aside the cynicism that too often surrounds us, which I thought was a powerful message to those graduates. So talk to me about that within the current environment that we're all surrounded by, multiple pandemics, election season, challenges to staying engaged because we're all in these remote and virtual environments. And so talk to us about how we choose to keep prioritizing engagement based on that message you delivered in 2018.
Well, it's really easy to get distracted, isn't it? There are so many people and issues and causes and what about is this and what about that ism. And I think a lot of it is designed to distract us from actually solving problems. And so one of the things that I feel we all ought to focus on is just don't let the distractions get you down, but focus on there's a problem, what can you do to help solve it, and focus on the substance of it rather than maybe some of the distractions or divisive rhetoric that may come our way. And I think that if you focus on trying to solve those problems, the cynicism, starts to fade away because the cynicism gets bred, I believe, in the ways of distracting us and focusing our, we need to refocus our attention, I think, on the problems in front of us. If we do that, then the cynicism, I think, goes away.
And I think maybe the environment we're in sort of lends itself to that, particularly the virtual environment, to become, feeling isolated and disconnected. Don't you think? I'm not sure how the people you're interacting with on a daily basis feel, but I hear that from some of the people in the PIC community as well.
I think that there is definitely in COVID world a lack of human interaction. Human contact is so critical to how we thrive as human beings. To love, to touch, to feel, to converse, to relate. And we can't do that because it's not safe to do that. Certainly not without a mask and without staying socially distanced. So what we have to do, I think, is to find ways to be more volitional about our human interactions and to, keep pressing forward. I feel like, every generation gets tested in some different ways. Our parents and our grandparents had the Great Depression and World War II and, the struggle over civil rights. And maybe this is the cross that our world and our generation has to bear, and we'll look back and say, yeah, we were holed up in our homes and apartments, but we made it through and we got through together, and we looked out for each other, and hopefully that'll be what we say on the far side of it.
Well, and also we had an opportunity to get reminded of the things that are important, the things that we sometimes take for granted, like, gathering together and a lot of different activities the week of homecoming, or, talking to a mentor or connecting with family far away. So I think those are probably some of the lessons, definitely.
Yeah, and I think that PED and the university communities as a whole have done a really amazing job of trying to create more connectedness in spite of the physical challenges of that. And we need to keep doing that while focusing on safety first. There's part of it is the instinct among young people to feel invincible, and so we have to overcome that and accelerate that curve of wisdom that says maybe I can defer some gratification and that won't be such a bad thing. I don't mean preachy, but it's sort of something that you view 40 years on from your university experience.
I'm not going to tell you what age I got to when that feelings of invincibility stopped. We'll save that for when the cameras are turned off.
Got it.
You've heard in Pitt Honors, we've adopted this message for students that one of the unique things about Pitt Honors is that we cross boundaries. And I have to tell you, that is just a great way to describe your career, is through crossing all different types of boundaries. So share with us a couple of your favorite examples of what you've been able to do that you think are examples of you crossing boundaries.
Well, I'm an appellate lawyer and I get asked to come in to argue appeals, typically from cases that have been lost, but occasionally cases that have been won. And probably the biggest cases that I've had have been cases where I had absolutely zero experience in that area of law.
Oh, wow.
And so like my first antitrust case was the case United States versus Microsoft. And my first pharmaceutical case was a case in the Supreme Court involving a woman who had lost her arm because of a side effect from a pharmaceutical. My first labor management relations case was the NFL concussion case. And so, when when encountering something new, I think the first thing is just overcoming the fear that I don't know anything about this and I could really look stupid if I don't really bone up on it. And the wonderful thing about having an education and having been subjected to a rigorous critical study over a wonderful undergraduate curriculum is overcoming the fear of the unknown and knowing that, okay, this is my first case about whatever subject you call it. I just need to read. I got to get after it. I've got to read. I've got to learn. I've got to listen to people. I've got to take in information from people that are smarter than me. And, then some of the fear starts to ebb and you realize, okay, I can kind of hang with this. I know what I know. I know what I don't know. I know what I need to learn to argue or present this case. And I think that makes then the boundaries look like they're challenges that are fun to cross. And then when you feel a sense of accomplishment when you've crossed into some new, I always think of the old Star Trek, going to frontiers that we've never known. You sort of feel like, hey, this is kind of cool. I learned something about this. And that gives you confidence and makes you feel empowered. And those are really wonderful things than just staying in a rut, so to speak, academically, where you're just focusing on your one area. And maybe you're mastering that area, but this gives you an opportunity to expand yourself and to draw upon different areas of knowledge that maybe you hadn't tapped into in a long time.
Does it make you start to crave those opportunities? You sort of look and say, where haven't I been? What boundaries are yet for me to cross? Or here's another venue that I don't know, that instead of it being anxious to taking you outside your comfort zone, you start to look for those opportunities as well.
Well, there's some of that, although I do think that there does come a time when you're really focusing on what can you do well and how can you make a difference in doing what you do well. And the exploration of finding your way to that place can lead you to crossing different boundaries in different ways. And so, I try to pick my spots now where I'm not going to completely go off the rails if it doesn't go right. Because I respect what I don't know, I guess is the best way to put it, and how much I have to learn to be really conversant in a particular area. And that's really hard. It takes a lot of work to do that. And so, I try to limit how far I'm going now into complete areas like neuroscience. Like I would be very careful about trying to venture into that area.
So as an interesting point you brought up, say more about that. What do you think are some of the common threads that tie your work together? As you develop such a powerful area of expertise, are there some common themes or common issues or common challenges that tend to ignite your passion to want to champion and get involved in?
Well, one of the things that in my area of law, I find that the more that you read and learn, the more you see comparisons and analogies to different areas and different things that you can learn. But I would say the common element is the older I get, the more I learn from young people. And I try to surround myself with the smartest young people that I can and get them to teach me and to try to, check my ego at the door and invite them to teach me as they are working up a case or learning about an area, or they've had more time to read more stuff than I have. And we actually have a we have an engagement at that level. And I was, again, to your first question about Justice White, this was one of the things that I learned from him. We had a really, really hard case about the desegregation of Mississippi's university system.
Oh,
And it was the first case at the Supreme Court involving desegregation in public higher ed since Brown against Board of Education. So Brown deals with this problem of desegregation at the public school level where there's mandatory attendance. And at the university level, of course, there's choice. Do you go to the public university or do you go to the private university? Do you go to this public university or that public university? And because of that element of choice, the question of how the state chose to structure or fund universities where there was a certain level of volition in what the attendance was and who the demographics that made up that attendance created a really vexing constitutional problem. Well, so here we are in 1991, and Justice White gets assigned this opinion that basically holds that Mississippi had not gone far enough to desegregate its higher ed university system. And I'm the law clerk assigned to work on this. And I remember we worked really, really hard. That was the one opinion where all of his normal protocols about how long it should be, how much time to write. He had very strict rules about, I want the opinion 12 pages in 12 days, crank it out, get it done. This was the one exception that he made. And I remember at one point, I looked at him and I said, well, this justice wants this part and amplified, and that justice doesn't want that amplified, but wants this. And I was going through all of the different choices that different justices want. And at one point, he kind of looked at me over his glasses, and I said, I hope you don't think I'm being impertinent by saying all of these things to you. And he looked at me and he said, 2 good minds are better than one. And I thought that, as a justice who'd been on the Supreme Court for 30 years, that he was willing to listen to me as a 31-year-old young lawyer. It was very empowering, but it was also very instructive. And I've tried to have young people around me who are not afraid to tell me when they think I'm wrong or when they think I need to do more or hear more. And those kinds of lessons that you learn as a young person, if you really take them to heart, become common threads in so many of the cases that I've done.
I've seen that visit Pitt Honors and how much time you take interacting with students and answering their questions and sharing your experiences. It has such a powerful impact on them, you as an alum, and the things that you've accomplished after you've left Pitt. One of them is being Pitt's first ever Rhodes Scholar. And so say something about that experience and how that has helped to shape and but also challenge you as having had that experience at Oxford.
Well, that was like getting thrown into the complete unknown. Pitt had somebody interview for a Rhodes, but had not won one. And Pitt hadn't had anybody come from Texas. I grew up in San Antonio and came to Pitt on a debate scholarship. So it was like, go figure it out. We're going to do our best to help you with the process, but we have no idea what the situation is there on the ground. And I think that for me, what was wonderful was how much work and effort the people at, this was before Pitt had an honors college, but it was an honors program at the time. And the degree of devotion and energy and care that the folks at the Pitt Honors program then put into helping me was phenomenal. And I couldn't have done it without them. And I think a lot of it for me inculcated a sense of responsibility to the institution and to the greater world, because one of the elements of the Rhodes Scholarship is leadership and interest in for lack of a better way to put it, disadvantaged communities. And I felt like the lessons of the roads are, the criteria of the roads are actually, they're wonderful lessons for how to lead a good, full life.
Yeah.
And as I met other road scholars, and as I had an opportunity to be at Oxford to study, it really filled me with a sense of a responsibility, I would say.
No, that's terrific to sharing that. We have a question that came in from one of the audience members that has a lot to do with the Supreme Court that they want to get your perspective on, about the commentary that's out there about reforms and court structure and taking politics out of it. What do you think about the merits of the ideas about things like tenure or additional members, or length of moving away from lifetime membership? Any reflection? I know you've done a lot of writing in some of these areas. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that there's no doubt that the recent events have focused more attention on whether the court is in balance with the divisions in the country, and I think that there are quite legitimate concerns about the court getting out of balance with the direction of where most voters are. And these reforms have been proposed as ideas to try to reset the balance of the court. And those are natural political reactions and responses. I think that, to some extent, law develops in a very slow way, even though we kind of think about the importance of a particular case here and there. And some things that would require a constitutional change, like changing the tenure of justices from life tenure to a term, I think are. It seems hard to imagine that they would get through the constitutional amendment process, given how divided the country is and the difficult structural impediments to constitutional change. Other changes, like affecting the jurisdiction of what the court could consider, or possibly adding members to the court, or changing the way the court and the federal courts of appeals, which have a couple of hundred members, might interact on any given case. Those are other ideas that could be done on a statutory basis, meaning Congress could change them. And again, I think that there are so many issues that need to be addressed in our society, not the least of which is this COVID problem, that as important as the Supreme Court is, and I think it's important because that's where I've dedicated my advocacy efforts, we got a lot of really much more important problems as a society to focus on first before we address the Supreme Court structurally. And I suspect that that's where most of the political attention will go. The court has a way of, tempering some of the extremes in certain situations, because there are very wise people on the court who understand what's going on in the country. And so we'll have to see. I would think that the response right out of the box would not be to implement Supreme Court reform, but to focus on some of these larger problems like healthcare for people, and jobs for people that have lost their jobs as a result of COVID, or the racial injustice problem, which is a very significant issue that needs to be addressed in a very thoughtful, inclusive way.
You spoke about being in this COVID era, and one of the students has a question about advice you have for students who are about to be recent grads, who are really wanting to get into law and public service and trying to navigate during this COVID era. So the typical tools and techniques we have just don't apply in this era. So what are your thoughts?
Well, it's really challenging, and I don't know that I've got any great silver bullet advice or ideas. I think that the best thing that I can offer is some sense of hope for people who keep chipping away at it and don't get discouraged. Keep trying to make contacts, keep trying to advance your own knowledge. COVID is a great opportunity for more reading. I've actually read more books the last 6 months than I expected to, because I'm not having to commute, an hour a day going downtown and back. And I would just say trying to use time efficiently to learn, to advance, to become more educated, self-educated. And for those folks that are trying to get into the legal profession or learning about potential job opportunities, I think that persistence is a really and determination are important qualities, because it's just really tricky. There's so much uncertainty all around, and I think that what young people will find is that older people are tending to be more compassionate about the differences. A lot of us lived through the financial meltdown of 2008, 2009. And there's a lost generation of lawyers who came out right in the height of the financial crash. And that wasn't so long ago for those of us to remember how hard it was. And so I would just say, keep at it. And I'm sure that we're going to get a rebound.
So think about, I know it's a different time and a different context, but I think some of the tools translate. How did you go about picking Pitt and then picking different opportunities? How did you know I should go right versus left, or left versus right, or this versus that? I think I hear that a lot from students about how do you decide different choices. So your choice to come to Pitt and then your choice, upon graduation. Talk to us a little bit about those choice sets.
Well, I was coming out of high school. I had been active in speech and debate, and I had gone to a summer debate institute at Pitt, and I'd gotten to meet the debate coach and became friendly with some of the debaters. And it was a personal choice. It was, where do I think I'm going to be comfortable? Who do I want to hang out with? Who do I want to learn from? And then once I got here, this thing called the honors program was just getting started. And the director of the honors program, Alex Stewart, said, you're interested in history, why don't you take this history class that William Stanton is teaching called Ideas in America in the colonial period up to the Civil War. And I thought, wow, that sounds really interesting. And there were 4 of us in the class. So I'm just starting as a freshman at Pitt, and I'm in this class with 4 people, 3 other people. And this wonderful historian is teaching, and he's challenging us. And I remember the midterm, I got a C+ on the midterm. And
was that your first C+ ever in life?
Well, regrettably, no, that was not my first, but it was my second. And it forced me to work really hard to try to up my game. But that professor really took me under, and I learned so much about writing from him. And one of the things that I learned at Pitt was that who you learn from and who you kind of attach yourself to and who you choose to be mentored by can make an enormous difference in your life and can lead you into areas that maybe you didn't expect at all. I'm sitting here, one of the areas of putative expertise that I have is maritime law. I've argued more maritime law cases in the US Supreme Court than probably anybody since the early 19th century. And the reason is because at law school, I had a professor who was a maritime law expert, and he took me under wing, and I became his research assistant and learned a lot about maritime law. And then he got some cases that he didn't want to argue, and he asked me if I would argue them, and we would work together. And we've had this collaboration for over 30 years now. But it is it's very, who do you like to work with and learn from kind of an experience? And I think that the choice of going left or right or straight or up or down or whatever is a very human influenced path. And I tell people that if you find that you're attaching yourself to good people from whom you're learning and you're growing, that it's the right place. You don't want to be in a situation where you're unhappy on a daily basis because you don't like the people that you're working with or what you're doing. And that if you focus on who do you get to hang out with that you grow from, then kind of the subject matter in a way almost becomes beside the point. Because you could be working on the absolutely most interesting subject matter, but if you're doing it with an ogre, you're not going to have
it
as
is
much
torture,
fun.
right?
Yeah.
So, I know that you've dabbled into some other areas that people might see outside of your expertise, particularly being in the film producing realm. So what other kind of things would people be surprised to know that you have been dabbling in recently? And tell us about one or two of them.
Well, I helped to put together a music video called I Have a Right to Vote by a very prominent composer here in the DC area, Nolan Williams Jr., who took this song as an anthem, a voting rights anthem, from a musical that he had done, Stirring the Waters Across America, which is kind of a history of the civil rights movement put to music that he composed. And we thought that it would be a way of helping inspire people that in spite of all the problems that we have, that our most powerful tool is the right to vote. And he was putting this together right at the time John Lewis died. And so we talked about what was working and what wasn't working in the way he did this. He did an absolutely brilliant job. You can go to www.ihavearight.vote and click on it and see the video. It's really a wonderful thing. But my wife Sophie and I helped put that together. And then just a range of things that I feel like a lot of what I'm trying to do is to help fill gaps. I try to identify where is there a gap or a need, and what can I do to help fill that. That's led me into some interesting things in the arts. For instance, I think that one of the challenges in the arts are among the Latino population, which has not had the kind of voice in the theater world as a dominant white society, and even for that matter, Black society. There's not an August Wilson in the Latino community in the way that you might expect, given the talent in that community. And so, finding a way to lift up and create opportunities for playwrights who are Latinos to get an opportunity to have their work staged has been a project that my wife and I have been engaged in to try to help that community and just sort of give create more opportunities for people.
I have to tell you, it's a wonderful piece. And I have to tell you a secret. Whenever I'm feeling pessimistic about what's going on, that's one of the videos I put on and say, nope, we've still got to keep pressing forward. It really, the word inspiring is an understatement about what the artists were able to pull off. So, what inspires you to stay engaged with Pitt? So since we're talking about inspiring things.
Well, I feel a great debt of obligation, because a lot of the experiences I've had in life started as kernels at Pitt. And I'm the kind of person who, if somebody does something for me, I feel a sense of reciprocity in giving back. And if I feel like if I can give back more than I got, then that was probably a pretty good way to be. And so some of it is that. Some of it is that I feel like Pitt has tremendous resources and tremendous opportunities to help shape the lives of lots and lots of people in ways that we may not fully appreciate. My father was first generation college, and my college roommate at Pitt was first generation college. And the number of students at Pitt that I encountered who were first generation college was really high back in the late 70s, early 80s. And, Pitt has a very special role, not just in Western Pennsylvania, but really nationally and internationally. And finding a way to help the university, to me, just seems like a natural fit.
And create those access and opportunities. You probably still keep in contact with people who you knew when you were at Pitt, and that network. Talk about how important maintaining those Pitt relationships are over time.
Well, one of the things that they don't teach you in college or in law school is that your friends that you make can actually help you in ways that you were not expecting so much. And one of my friends on the debate team has been a friend now for 40 plus years. And we still get together every year, multiple times. And, those kinds of friendships and relationships that you never know when you might need a little bit of a help or an assist. So one of my friends from Oxford who ended up at the Mayo Clinic, I kept in touch with her. She's a wonderful surgeon. And we had this case in the Supreme Court involving medical evidence and how statistically significant evidence might or might not change how a medical professional views a particular problem. So I called her up and I said, I got this problem, I got this issue. You've done studies. Tell me, am I off base to think that it's contextual as well as what is statistically significant data? And she just went on this long riff. This is a friend that I had for 30 years before, for this. And I said, God, that's really cool. Would you write an amicus brief for us? So I teamed her up with a lawyer friend of mine. She writes this amicus brief. And doggone it, if the Supreme Court doesn't quote it like a bunch of times in the majority opinion that rules for us, but that all flowed out of a relationship and a friendship that I had made back way in the day with someone who had nothing to do with my particular area of expertise, but she was a good person. And, we've been dear friends for all this time. And, they don't teach you these kinds of relationship building and friendship when it's, cultivated and maintained can really enrich your life later. And that'd be one thing that I would hope people listening today might appreciate.
Yeah, that strong connection and support, particularly from the worldwide network of Pitt alum. And even though I'm not an alum at Pitt, whenever I travel and I meet someone that's alum, there's an automatic tie. I said, I don't care what department you're in or when you went, you're family, you're part of the Pitt community. So they're flagging me that we're almost out of time. I can't believe how fast this is going. So I really want to ask you one question about a message that that you could share with our students and faculty and alumni and guests about what gives you hope. I think it's important in all these crazy times and the pandemic and everything that we've talked about today, and all the things that you've done and accomplished. What gives you hope? And that would be a good place for us to wrap up our conversation today, don't you think?
Well, I think what gives me hope are the young people in the world who are the least racially prejudiced of any generation, the most interested in the future of the planet of any generation, the most willing to make sacrifices to help make the world better, and who have access to so much information and knowledge and are interested in lots of different things in the world. And that gives me hope that in spite of the fact that I think we have some very significant problems that we face, we've got this coterie of young people that are really dedicated toward trying to help make the world safe, more just, better. And so that's what gives me hope. It's trying to sometimes following the lead of younger people who are really adamant that we've got to do something about particular problems, you have to stop and take stock and say, yep, that young person's got it, absolutely got it right. So that's what gives me hope.
Absolutely. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate all the advice and support you've given to me in the role that I play within the Honors College as acting dean. The conversations we've had and the challenges that you've issued and your perspective on how important the Pitt Honors experience was to you have just been invaluable. And so I wish we could be face to face and in person so that I could toast this amazing recognition that's so well deserved. But we will gather face to face again soon. And so I owe you the first round. But let me, on behalf of all the faculty, staff, and the entire Pitt community, say congratulations on this well-deserved recognition. We applaud you and we appreciate and thank you for all you do. Hail to Pitt.
Thank you so much, Audrey. I appreciate it. It's been wonderful to be with you today, and I look forward to getting past the pandemic and letting the scientists do their work so that we can gather in person next time.
We look forward to seeing you in the cathedral sometime really soon.
All right. Take care. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.